Roseanne was more than a sitcom. It was a cultural force that redefined American television through the late 80s and 90s. But behind the decades of laughter and Emmy-winning success, a series of real-life tragedies unfolded. From heartbreaking overdoses to silent battles with disease, many of the show's most beloved actors met shocking and untimely ends. Today we're diving deep into the lives and final days of the stars who made Roseanne unforgettable. Like and comment to honor these legends. Glenn Quinn played Mark Healy, the rough-edged, leather-jacketed boyfriend who brought just the right dose of rebellion to the Connor household in Roseanne. Behind that smirking charm and soulful stare was a man whose real-life story turned heartbreakingly darker than the role he played. Born in Dublin, Ireland on May 28, 1970, Glenn moved to the U.S. with his mother and two sisters when he was just 18. Within 2 years, he landed the role that would define him, Mark Healy, a character who became not just Becky's husband, but a symbol of misunderstood youth for millions of viewers. With his natural Irish charisma tucked behind an American accent, Glenn stole scenes and hearts across the country, but the fame that lifted him also quietly crushed him. For 7 seasons, Glenn had to hide his true voice, literally. Speaking in a forced accent and playing a character that typecast him, he began losing touch with his own identity. After Roseanne, he found a second chance in Angel, a spin-off of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where he finally got to speak with his real Irish accent. Fans embraced it, but by then the shadows were already closing in. Behind the scenes, Glenn was battling heroin addiction, a war made worse by loneliness, pressure, and a deep sense of isolation in Hollywood. He'd vanish between takes, arrive dazed on set, and struggle to hold on to clarity even during brief stints in rehab. Friends called him kind, gentle, and incredibly lost. By 1997, his addiction had cost him his role on Angel. The man once celebrated as a breakout star was now living out of motels, banned from the very nightclub he had once co-owned. On December 3, 2002, Glenn Quinn was found dead from an overdose in a friend's home in North Hollywood. He was only 32. They never recast Mark, not because they didn't try, but because Glenn had become irreplaceable. For those who watched him in the 90s, his death wasn't just the loss of an actor, it was the quiet end of a chapter we didn't know meant so much until it was gone. Shelley Winters played Nana Mary, the blunt, sassy, chain-smoking grandmother who wasn't afraid to speak her mind. Though her screen time was limited, every moment she appeared felt unforgettable. And that's because Shelley didn't play Nana Mary. She was Nana Mary, just with a different name. Born Shirley Shrift on August 18, 1920 in St. Louis, Missouri, Shelley was a force in American cinema for more than 70 years. She could play anything: desperate factory girls, wicked mothers, seductive women, or eerie old souls. She won 2 Academy Awards, a Golden Globe, and stood toe-to-toe with legends like Elizabeth Taylor, James Dean, and Montgomery Clift. But if her film roles were dramatic, her real life was pure chaos. Shelley went through 4 marriages, and not one ended peacefully. One husband locked her in a closet out of jealousy. Another couldn't handle her success and left, calling her too loud for love. Her final marriage? A bizarre and haunting twist. She remarried her ex-husband Victoria Gassman just hours before her death, with a bedside wedding officiated by actress-turned-minister Sally Kirkland. Her relationship with her daughter Victoria was no less turbulent. Their estrangement played out in tabloids with raw bitterness on both sides. They didn't speak for years, only making peace near the end. Yet for all her broken relationships, Shelley was never alone. Her memoir proudly listed her lovers: Sean Connery, William Holden, Errol Flynn, and even Marlon Brando. And Shelley wasn't just fire on screen, she took that same fire into the real world. She marched for civil rights in Selma in 1965, spoke out for women's rights in Israel, and was a bold voice at countless Democratic conventions. Hollywood may have seen her as a diva, but underneath that was a woman who never stopped fighting, for herself, for others, and for the truth. In 2005, a heart attack brought her fiery run to a slow, quiet end. Her health declined rapidly, and the once electric Shelley Winters faded from the spotlight. She passed away on January 14, 2006 at the Beverly Hills Rehabilitation Center at age 85. Just days before, she had sealed her last chapter with that surreal deathbed wedding, a moment so strange yet so fitting for a woman who lived as loudly as she loved. Shelley was laid to rest at Hillside Memorial Park in California, among other Hollywood greats. At the time of her death, her net worth was around $10 million, built not just from decades on screen, but from sharp strategic real estate moves few even knew about. Martin Mull played Leon Karp, the sarcastic, stiff, and sharply dressed boss whose dry wit and unapologetic personality made him one of TV's most unlikely fan favorites. For 6 seasons, he played the gay, no-nonsense manager who was equal parts annoying and oddly lovable. But behind those clever one-liners and calculated glances was a man far more complex and far more wounded than the character he portrayed. Born Martin Eugene Mull on August 18, 1943 in Chicago, he arrived on Roseanne at 48, already known for his intellectual edge and unique comedic timing. But that sharp mind often came with sharper walls. Martin went through 2 painful divorces, each described by friends as emotionally exhausting and deeply isolating. He once admitted bluntly, "I'm too independent to be loved easily." That wasn't false modesty. Martin could be cold, complicated, and at times brutally dismissive. His final relationship with singer Wendy Hawes offered a brief sense of stability, though even that came with long stretches of silence and distance. He'd vanish into his art studio for days, consumed by painting, the one place where he didn't have to explain himself. In Hollywood, Martin was both admired and avoided. His refusal to compromise made him a magnet for conflict on set. On Sabrina the Teenage Witch, he clashed so heavily with directors over creative control that producers quietly reduced his scenes. Colleagues respected his talent but feared his intensity. He once said, "Hollywood rewards convenience, not uniqueness," a phrase that captured both his brilliance and his bitterness. In his final years, Martin was quietly losing a battle he refused to talk about, a relentless lung cancer that stripped away his strength breath by breath. He shrank into the walls of his art studio, refusing help, refusing visitors, and refusing to let anyone see the shadow he had become. "I'm fine," he'd say, even as his lungs gave out and the colors on his canvas blurred. He died on June 27, 2024, in quiet solitude. No headlines, no final interview, just a once brilliant voice fading into silence, unnoticed by an industry that once chased his sharp tongue. Hollywood barely paused, and maybe that's what hurt the most. For all the lines he delivered, no one was there to write his last. At the time of his death, Martin Mull's estate was valued at around $8 million, royalties from the sitcoms he made unforgettable, and the paintings he left behind, now cherished by a few close friends like Steve Martin. Fred Willard played Scott, the sweet, witty partner of Leon Karp in Roseanne, first appearing when he was 62. With his innocent grin, soft voice, and impeccable timing, Fred was the kind of actor who made people smile before he even spoke. To many, he felt like America's favorite goofy grandpa, a symbol of safe, gentle comedy. But behind the laughter was a life marked by tension, heartbreak, and public disgrace. Born on September 18, 1933, Fred built a career spanning decades. His marriage to Mary Lovell lasted over 50 years and looked unshakable on the surface. But close friends saw what others didn't: the long silences, the weeks he'd disappear into the fog of alcohol and prescription painkillers, the late-night filming that doubled as escape. Mary once described him as a man who lit up every room until the room turned quiet, and so did he. In 2012, Fred's world crumbled. He was arrested at an adult movie theater on suspicion of lewd conduct, a shocking turn that shattered his wholesome image. Though never charged, the scandal led to his firing from PBS's Market Warriors and an unofficial blacklist. Producers stopped calling. Former colleagues went silent. Fred, now in his late 70s, admitted the incident was humiliating. He agreed to attend a sexual education course, but the damage was irreversible. For the first time, the man who made the world laugh became the subject of hushed conversations and cruel headlines. Then came the quiet years. After Mary's death in 2018, Fred was never quite the same. Already battling myelodysplastic syndrome and heart disease, he withdrew completely from the spotlight. Family members said he rarely left his Los Angeles home. He relied on heavy painkillers, avoided calls, and spent most days alone, a gentle soul shrinking in the shadow of his own pain. Fred was still funny, a friend recalled, but only in flashes, like a fading bulb that flickered once more before going dark. On May 15, 2020, Fred Willard passed away from cardiac arrest, with blood-related illness as a contributing factor. He was 86 years old. He was laid to rest at Forest Lawn alongside countless legends. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $10 million, mostly from timeless hits like This Is Spinal Tap, Best in Show, and a long list of TV comedies that made generations laugh. But in the end, what Fred gave the world wasn't just jokes, it was warmth. The tragedy is that when he needed it most, the warmth wasn't returned. Ned Beatty played Ed Connor, Dan Connor's stern yet warm-hearted father. When he first stepped into the role at 52, Ned brought a sense of grounded strength, the kind of father figure who could scare you straight with one look, then hug you a second later. His kind face and gravelly voice felt deeply American, like he belonged in the living room of every family. But behind that calm, paternal presence was a man silently breaking under the weight of wounds no camera could ever capture. Born on July 6, 1937, Ned's rise to fame was fast and unforgettable. His breakout performance in Deliverance, 1972, shocked the world and changed him forever. The infamous rape scene he endured on screen became more than just a role. It became a lifelong trauma. Ned later admitted he drank heavily for years to numb the shame and psychological scarring that followed. Fame came fast, but it came at a horrifying cost. Even after being nominated for an Oscar in Network, 1976, Beatty kept fame at arm's length. He had already paid too much for it once. He avoided the spotlight, turned down major roles, and quietly stepped back, not out of pride, but out of fear. Ned's personal life was no easier. He married 4 times and fathered 8 children, but his temper and emotional volatility sabotaged many of those relationships. One divorce exploded into a public custody battle. Some of his kids distanced themselves for years. Only his final wife, Sandra Johnson, remained by his side until the very end, the only constant in a life filled with departures. In the 2000s, Ned's star dimmed. He took on smaller roles, Shooter, Toy Story 3, Rango, but the red carpets faded. The calls slowed. Hollywood had moved on, and so did Ned, quietly, on purpose. He chose silence over spectacle, privacy over applause. On June 13, 2021, Ned Beatty passed away at his home in Los Angeles. He was 83. There was no big farewell, no major tribute, just a quiet departure for a man who once screamed through the silver screen and then chose to disappear from it. His estate was valued at around $5 million, modest compared to what he gave cinema. Because no number could ever measure the raw emotion, the vulnerability, the bravery he brought to every role. Debbie Reynolds played Audrey Connor, the eccentric, emotionally fragile mother of Dan in Roseanne. At 65, she delivered a performance that felt almost too real. The script, written by her daughter Carrie Fisher, painted Audrey's unraveling mental state with eerie accuracy because it mirrored Debbie's own storm beneath the spotlight. Born Mary Frances Reynolds on April 1, 1932 in El Paso, Texas, Debbie soared from poverty to become America's darling in Singin' in the Rain, 1952. But off-screen, her life was anything but charming. 3 marriages, all ending in heartbreak. The first, with singer Eddie Fisher, exploded into a media firestorm when he left her for her close friend, Elizabeth Taylor. That betrayal crushed her. Debbie spiraled into a deep depression, but for the sake of her children, especially her daughter Carrie, she wiped her tears, fixed her makeup, and went back to work. Carrie and Debbie, two icons, two forces, two storms, were bound by a love so intense it burned through joy and pain. Their relationship was chaotic, messy, tender, and fiercely protective. And in the end, heartbreak didn't come quietly. On December 27, 2016, Carrie Fisher died suddenly from cardiac arrest. Debbie collapsed the next day. Her heart, already worn from decades of silent suffering, simply gave out. She passed away at 84 with her son revealing her final words, "I want to be with Carrie." That sentence hit like a thunderclap. A mother's final breath chasing her child into the afterlife. They were buried side by side, their coffins riding together, not on a movie set but in real life, as Hollywood watched in silence. No script could ever capture the pain of that farewell. Debbie had dedicated her later years to preserving cinema history, pouring her fortune into a film memorabilia museum, a passion that left her millions in debt. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at $85 million, much of it lost in that dream. But no dollar figure could measure the weight she carried, the decades of smiling through tears, dancing while breaking inside. Debbie Reynolds wasn't just a star. She was a mother, a fighter, a woman who stood in the ruins of betrayal and heartbreak and still dared to shine. Her final act, a love so fierce it followed death, left a silence so loud, Hollywood still hasn't found the words to respond. Wings Hauser played Ty Tilden, a rugged, unpredictable character who showed up in Roseanne in 1992. At 45, Wings already carried the weathered energy of a man who'd lived too hard, too fast. His gravelly voice, wild stare, and edge of violence presence made him perfect for dark, dangerous roles. But what audiences didn't see was the wreckage he dragged behind each performance. Born on December 12, 1947, Wings never had a gentle start. Before fame, he lived in a car parked in an abandoned garage with nothing but a guitar and a newborn daughter. He was broke, broken, and desperate. Music was supposed to save him, but his debut album flopped. Acting came next, and in Vice Squad, 1982, he delivered a terrifying breakout performance as Ramrod, a psychotic pimp so convincingly evil, some viewers swore he wasn't acting. But he was, and it was killing him. That kind of immersion, living inside monsters, ripped open old wounds. The 80s became a blur of alcohol and drugs. Wings later called it the clearest I've ever been in the middle of madness. But clarity didn't bring peace, it brought more chaos. His personal life was no better. 3 marriages, a daughter, Bright, who lived estranged from him for years, a son, Cole Hauser, now a star in Yellowstone, who grew up without him. Cole once said he didn't even know his father was an actor. Their eventual reunion after years of distance was one of the few quiet healings Wings ever allowed himself. After the early 2000s, Hollywood stopped calling, and Wings didn't chase it. Diagnosed with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, he withdrew almost completely. He moved with his final partner, Callie Lilly, to a small beachside home in Santa Monica, where they ran a quiet animal sanctuary. Most days were spent with oxygen tanks, silence, and regret. He rarely gave interviews. He never watched his old movies again. On March 15, 2025, Wings Hauser died after a long decline, body worn down by illness, soul weathered by 1,000 unfinished apologies. He was 77. The industry barely noticed. There were no tributes, no headlines. Just a man who once roared on screen, now fading into the sound of crashing waves. His net worth was estimated at $3 million, mostly from old action flicks that aired late at night on forgotten channels. But none of that mattered to Wings. In the end, he only cared that his son forgave him and that the dogs didn't leave his side. Emma Roberts played Addie Singer, the quirky guitar-strumming teen navigating middle school chaos in Nickelodeon's Unfabulous. At just 13, she charmed an entire generation with her awkward honesty and quiet confidence. But behind the scenes, Emma wasn't just another teen star, and she was Hollywood bloodline, born to shine but expected to prove it. Born on February 10, 1991 in Rhinebeck, New York, Emma is the daughter of actor Eric Roberts and the niece of Julia Roberts. After her parents split when she was still an infant, she was raised primarily by her mother, Kelly Cunningham. Spending time on Julia's movie sets as a kid sparked something in her, not just the dream, but the will to chase it. At age 10, she landed her first film role in Blow, playing the daughter of Johnny Depp's character. But Unfabulous was the game changer. The show's success led to a music album, magazine covers, and red carpets, all before she was old enough to drive. Unlike many child stars, Emma managed to grow with her audience. From Aquamarine to Nancy Drew to Wild Child, she shifted into young adult roles with ease. Then came the more mature turns: Scream 4, We're the Millers, Nerve, and her standout performances in American Horror Story and Scream Queens, where she mastered the art of playing sharp-tongued queens with just enough vulnerability to keep you watching. Emma's personal life hasn't stayed off the radar. Her on and off relationship with actor Evan Peters, filled with breakups, reconciliations, and tabloid buzz, defined much of her 20s. Later, she welcomed her first child, son Rhodes, with actor Garrett Hedlund. Though that relationship ended, Emma found new peace in motherhood. In 2024, she announced her engagement to actor Cody John, a quieter chapter that feels more grounded. Beyond acting, Emma co-founded Bellatrist, a book club turned cultural platform that celebrates literature and female voices. She's also moved into producing, working behind the scenes on shows like Tell Me Lies and movies like Space Cadet, proving she's more than just a face in front of the camera. Now in her 30s, Emma lives in Los Angeles with her son in what she lovingly calls her grown-up dollhouse. Surrounded by vintage books, mid-century furniture, and stacks of scripts, she's found a rhythm. Not always glamorous, not always easy, but hers. Emma Roberts didn't just inherit a Hollywood name. She carved her own out of vulnerability, evolution, and quiet persistence. Roseanne wasn't just a sitcom, it was a mirror of real life, filled with voices we grew up with. Some of those voices are now silent, but through every laugh, every tear, and every goodbye, their legacy lives on.